The sound of the rain battering against the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the penthouse was the only thing filling the silence. Inside, the air was cold, colder than the storm raging over the city skyline. Victoria stood in the center of the living room. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the hem of her gray wool cardigan. It was old, frayed at the sleeves, a comfort piece she had worn since college. To her husband Grant, it was just another rag, another sign that she did not belong in his world. Grant stood by the fireplace, pouring himself a glass of aged whiskey. He did not offer her any. He did not even look at her. He just took a sip, savored the burn, and finally turned around. His tuxedo was impeccable, tailored to fit his broad shoulders perfectly. He looked like a prince, but tonight his eyes were those of an executioner. "Did you hear me, Victoria?" Grant asked, his voice smooth but laced with a deadly calm. "I said, sign the papers." On the marble coffee table between them lay a thick envelope. The document spilled out slightly. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Victoria felt the air leave her lungs. "Grant, we have only been married for 2 years. We promised for better or for worse." Grant laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. He walked over to the table and picked up the papers, tossing them closer to her. They slid across the polished marble with a hiss. "That is the problem, Victoria," he sneered, looking her up and down with open disgust. "There is no better with you. It is only worse. Look at you." Victoria instinctively wrapped her arms around herself. She was wearing a long, modest floral skirt and that gray cardigan. She had no makeup on. Her hair was pulled back in a simple, practical bun. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who valued simplicity and kindness over flashiness. "What is wrong with how I look?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Everything!" Grant shouted, finally losing his composure. The glass in his hand shook. "I am the CEO of Sterling Dynamics. I just closed a deal with the Japanese investors worth $200 million. Next week, I am being featured on the cover of Business Elite magazine." He stepped closer, invading her personal space. She smelled his expensive cologne, a scent she used to love, but now it made her stomach turn. "And do you know what they ask me, Victoria? They ask me why my wife looks like a maid. They ask me why at the company gala you stood in the corner drinking water, while the other wives were networking in Chanel and Dior. You are an embarrassment." Tears pricked Victoria's eyes, hot and stinging. "I do not like showing off, Grant. You knew that when you married me. You said you loved my simplicity. You said I was real, unlike those other women." "I lied," Grant said coldly. "Or maybe I just thought I could fix you. I thought if I gave you access to my credit cards, you would evolve. But you did not. You bought books. You bought yarn. You donated to charities anonymously. You refused to play the part of a CEO's wife." He walked back to the window, staring out at the city he believed he owned. "I have outgrown you, Victoria. A man in my position needs a power couple partner, a woman who commands a room when she walks in, a woman who makes other men jealous. You just make them pity me." Victoria stared at his back. The cruelty of his words felt like physical blows, but beneath the pain, something else was stirring, a memory. She remembered her father, Arthur Vance. Grant knew her as Victoria Vance, the quiet girl from the library. He did not know that Vance was the middle name of Arthur Vance Kingsley, the multi-billionaire owner of the Kingsley Group, the conglomerate that secretly owned the majority shares of Grant's own suppliers. She had hidden her identity because she wanted to be loved for herself, not her father's empire. She wanted to know if a man could love Victoria the person, not Victoria the heiress. "Brant," she said softly, drying her tears. She stood up straighter. "If this is about money, if this is about status, there is something you need to know, something I haven't told you."
Grant waved his hand dismissively without turning around. "Save it. If you're going to tell me you're pregnant, don't bother. I've already spoken to my lawyers. If there is a child, I will take full custody. You cannot afford a lawyer who can beat mine." Victoria froze. She was not pregnant, but the threat chilled her to the bone. "I was not going to say that. I was going to tell you about my family." Grant scoffed. "Your family? The truck driver father and the school teacher from Ohio? Please, Victoria, I don't need to hear about your quaint little poverty stories right now. I need you to sign the papers and get out. Get out!" Victoria blinked. "It's pouring rain. It's 11 p.m. "My driver is downstairs," Grant said, checking his Rolex. "He will take you to a motel. I have paid for 2 nights. After that, you're on your own. Consider it a severance package." The elevator doors at the far end of the penthouse pinged open. Victoria turned, expecting the driver. Instead, a woman walked in. She was stunning, tall, wearing a deep red dress that clung to her curves, with diamonds dripping from her ears. Her makeup was flawless. Her heels clicked sharply on the floor. It was Isella, the vice president of marketing at Grant's company. Victoria felt the color drain from her face. "Isella." Isella smiled, a predatory, shark-like grin. She did not look at Victoria. She looked straight at Grant. "Is it done, darling? The car is waiting for us. The reservation at Le Bernardin is in 20 minutes. Grant's face transformed. The cold mask melted into a warm, charming smile as he walked over to Isella and kissed her on the cheek. "Almost, my love. She was just leaving." Victoria looked between them. The betrayal was not just financial. It was not just about clothes. "You're sleeping with her," Victoria stated, her voice flat. Isella laughed, a tinkering, artificial sound. She walked over to Victoria, looking her up and down with genuine pity. "Oh, honey, we have been together for 6 months. Did you really think Grant stayed late at the office to work on spreadsheets?" Isabella reached out and flicked the fabric of Victoria's gray cardigan. "This is wool blend, isn't it? It itches just looking at it. Grant deserves silk. He deserves fire. You are just dust." Grant walked back to the table, grabbed a pen, and thrust it toward Victoria. "Sign, now, or I throw your things off the balcony." Victoria looked at the pen. She looked at the husband she had adored, the man she had cooked for, cared for, and supported when his company was just a startup. She realized now that he never saw her. He only saw a prop that no longer fit his stage. She took the pen. She did not cry anymore. A strange calm washed over her. It was the Kingsley spirit waking up in her veins. Her father was known as the Iron Wolf of Wall Street. He destroyed competitors not with shouting, but with silence. Victoria signed her name, Victoria Vance. "Good." Grant snatched the papers away. "You can keep the jewelry I gave you. Pawn it. It should last you a month or 2 if you are careful." Victoria turned to leave. She did not pack a bag. She did not take a coat. She walked toward the elevator. Just before the doors closed, she looked back. Grant was already pouring champagne for Isabella, his back turned to his ex-wife. "Grant," Victoria said, her voice steady, cutting through the room. He looked over his shoulder, annoyed. "What?" "You wanted a woman who could command a room," Victoria said, her brown eyes flashing with a hidden fire. "You wanted a woman with power. Remember that." "Goodbye, Victoria," he sneered. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing her fate, or so he thought. As the elevator descended 40 floors to the lobby, Victoria reached into the pocket of her cheap gray cardigan. She pulled out a small, old-fashioned Nokia phone, a burner phone she kept for emergencies. She dialed a number she had not called in 3 years. It rang once, twice. A deep, gravelly voice answered. "Victoria." "Hello, Daddy," Victoria said, staring at her reflection in the metal doors. The crying woman was gone. The heiress was back. I am coming home, and I'm going to need the corporate jet. 20 minutes later, a black sedan with tinted windows pulled up to the curb where Victoria was standing. She was soaked to the bone, shivering, her cheap cardigan heavy with rainwater. The passers-by on the street looked at her with pity, a woman crying in the rain with no coat and no umbrella. They saw a homeless woman. They had no idea they were looking at the sole heir to the Kingsley fortune. The driver, a man named Thomas, who had served her father for 30 years, stepped out with a large black umbrella. He did not look at her with pity. He looked at her with reverence. "Miss Victoria," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion as he held the umbrella over her head. "Welcome back." He opened the back door. Victoria slid onto the beige leather seats. The car was warm. It smelled of expensive leather and peppermint, her father's favorite scent. As the door closed, sealing out the noise of the city and the storm, Victoria let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 2 years. "Take me to the airfield, Thomas," she whispered. "The jet is fueled and ready, ma'am," he replied, gliding the car into traffic. During the flight to the private Kingsley estate in the Hamptons, Victoria went to the bathroom of the private jet. She looked at herself in the gold-framed mirror. Grant's words echoed in her mind. Plain, boring, a maid. She reached up and pulled the pins out of her hair. Her dark, wet hair fell in waves around her shoulders. She took a warm towel and wiped the rain from her face. She looked into her own eyes. They were red from crying, but beneath the redness, the steel was returning. "Goodbye, Victoria Vance," she whispered to her reflection. "You were too good for him." When the car finally pulled up to the massive iron gates of the Kingsley Manor, it was past midnight. The estate was not just a house, it was a fortress of wealth. 12 bedrooms, a private library, sprawling gardens, and a garage filled with cars Grant could only dream of leasing. The front doors opened before she even reached the steps. Standing there, leaning on a cane with a silver wolf's head handle, was Arthur Vance Kingsley. He was 70 years old, but he still looked like a titan. He wore a velvet smoking jacket, and his white hair was combed back perfectly. He was the man Wall Street feared. He was the man who could crash a stock market with a single phone call. But right now, he was just a father. "Victoria," he choked out, dropping his cane. "Daddy!" She broke down, running into his arms. He caught her, holding her tight as she sobbed into his shoulder. For the first time that night, she allowed herself to be weak. She cried for the marriage she lost. She cried for the baby she had secretly dreamed of having with Grant. She cried for the 2 years she wasted trying to be simple just to please a man who only wanted shine. Arthur held her, stroking her hair. His eyes, looking over her shoulder into the dark night, were not sad. They were furious. A cold, terrifying rage was building in his chest. "I told you," Arthur whispered, his voice trembling with suppressed anger. "I told you he was small. I told you a man like that cannot understand a woman like you." "I loved him," Victoria sobbed. "I really loved him." "I know, my flower, I know." Arthur pulled back, gripping her shoulders. "What did he do? Did he hit you?" "No," Victoria wiped her face. "He did something worse. He discarded me. He said I was not enough. He said I looked like a maid. He left me for his VP, Isabella." Arthur's face darkened. Isabella, the one with the fake smile and the corporate espionage record? He left you for her? Arthur turned to Thomas, who was standing respectfully by the door. "Thomas, get me my phone. Call the legal team. I want Grant's company bought out by morning. I want his assets frozen. I want him on the street by noon tomorrow." "No!" Victoria shouted, her voice echoing in the grand foyer. Arthur stopped. He looked at his daughter, surprised. "No, Victoria, he threw you out in the rain. He humiliated you. Let me crush him. It will take me 5 minutes." Victoria straightened her back. She took a deep breath, smoothing down her wet skirt. The sadness was evaporating, replaced by the icy calculation she had inherited from her father. "If you crush him now, he will just think it is bad luck," Victoria said slowly. "He will not know it was me. He will not know it was the maid who destroyed him. He will play the victim." She walked over to the mirror in the hallway, looking at the grand chandelier reflected behind her. "I do not want him destroyed, Daddy. Not yet." "Then what do you want?" Arthur asked, intrigued. Victoria turned around. A small, dangerous smile played on her lips. It was the smile of a queen who had just picked up a sword. "I want him to regret it," she said. "I want him to see me. I want him to know exactly what he threw away. I want to buy his company, but I want to do it from the inside. I want to stand in front of him, look him in the eye, and watch the hope drain out of his face when he realizes I'm his boss." Arthur stared at her for a long moment, then a slow, proud grin spread across his face. "That's my girl," he said. "That's a Kingsley." He walked over to his desk and picked up a black credit card, the Centurion card, the black card that had no limit. He held it out to her. "Step 1, Arthur said. Kill Victoria Vance. The plain wife is dead." Victoria took the card. It felt cold and heavy in her hand. "Step 2, Arthur continued. You need a new look. If you're going to walk into Sterling Dynamics and take over, you need to look like you own the place. Tomorrow, Paris, we'll get you a wardrobe that will make Isabella look like she shops at a discount bin." Victoria nodded. "And step 3? "Step 3, Arthur's eyes glittered. "The gala. The annual Tech Innovation Gala is in 3 months. Grant has been trying to get an invitation to the VIP table for 5 years. He thinks he's finally getting in this year because of his new deal. He doesn't know who hosts the VIP table," Victoria realized. "Exactly," Arthur chuckled darkly. "I host it, and this year I'm not sitting at the head of the table." He pointed at her. "You are." Victoria looked down at the black card in her hand. She thought of Grant's sneer. She thought of Isabella's pity. Grant deserves silk. He deserves fire. "Okay," Victoria whispered. "Let's burn him down." The next morning, Victoria did not wake up to the sound of Grant complaining about his coffee. She woke up in the master suite of the Ritz Paris. Sunlight streamed through the heavy velvet curtains, illuminating a room filled with fresh white roses. She sat up, expecting to feel the crushing weight of heartbreak. It was there, a dull ache in her chest, but it was being pushed aside by a new feeling: purpose. Arthur had kept his promise. By 9 a.m., a team of stylists was waiting in the suite's living room. These were not the kind of stylists who dressed pop stars or Instagram models. These were the curators of the elite, the people who dressed royalty. Victoria walked out in her silk robe. She looked at the rack of clothes they had brought. It was a sea of fabric: silks, cashmere, velvet, and gold-threaded embroidery. "We were told you prefer modest elegance, Mademoiselle Kingsley," the lead stylist, a sharp Frenchwoman named Celine, said with a bow. Victoria ran her hand over a dress. It was not gray. It was a deep royal emerald green. Grant used to say modest meant boring, Victoria murmured. Celine scoffed. With all due respect, mademoiselle, your ex-husband sounds like a man who eats burgers and thinks he knows steak. Modesty is not boring. Modesty is power. It leaves everything to the imagination and demands respect. Celine held up a tailored cream blazer with gold buttons and a floor-length skirt. Put this on. Let us show you who you really are. For the next week, Victoria did not just shop, she underwent a metamorphosis. She stopped hunching her shoulders. She learned to walk with her chin up. Her hair, once pulled back in a messy bun, was treated and styled into glossy dark waves that cascaded down her back. Her skin, tired from years of stress and neglect, began to glow with the help of the best dermatologists in Europe. She did not buy flashy, revealing dresses like Isabella wore. She bought structured suits in ivory and navy. She bought high-necked evening gowns made of Italian silk that flowed like water. She bought diamond earrings that were small but cost more than Grant's entire car. She was no longer the mouse. She was the lioness. But the physical transformation was the easy part. The real work happened when they returned to New York. For the next 2 months, Victoria did not go outside. She lived in her father's library. The walls were lined with books on corporate law, mergers and acquisitions, and market strategy. Arthur did not treat her like a daughter during these hours. He treated her like a successor. "Sterling dynamics," Arthur said, pacing around the large mahogany desk. "Tell me their weakness." Victoria looked up from a stack of financial reports. She was wearing her new reading glasses, gold-rimmed and sharp. "They are over-leveraged," Victoria said confidently. "Grant wanted to expand too fast. He borrowed $50 million against his future earnings to open the Japanese branch. If the Japanese deal falls through, he defaults on his loans. He goes bankrupt in 30 days. Arthur smiled. "And how do we make the Japanese deal fall through?" Victoria tapped the paper with her pen. "We do not need to sabotage it. We just need to offer the Japanese investors something better. Sterling Dynamics relies on a specific microchip for their tech. Grant buys them from a supplier in Taiwan. And Victoria stood up, walking over to the map on the wall. "That supplier is owned by a shell company called Venture Holdings." She turned to her father, a gleam in her eye. "Daddy, who owns Venture Holdings?" Arthur laughed, a booming sound that filled the room. "You do, my dear. Or rather, you will by tomorrow morning. I am transferring the ownership to your name." Victoria stared at him. "Wait, you mean I control his supply chain? Right now?" "You control the oxygen he breathes," Arthur corrected. "He just doesn't know it yet. Without those chips, his new product launch fails. If the launch fails, the Japanese investors walk. If they walk, Grant is finished." Victoria sat back down, stunned by the power she held in her hands. She could end him with a phone call. She could shut down the factory, starve his company, and watch him panic. "No," Victoria said softly, "not yet. Let him build it up. Let him think he has won. Let him walk into that gala thinking he is the king of New York." "The gala is tomorrow night," Arthur reminded her. "Are you ready to face him? He'll be there with Isabella. They'll be celebrating their engagement." The news hit her like a physical slap. Engagement? It had only been 3 months. He had moved on that fast. He was going to put a ring on the woman who called her dust? Victoria looked down at her hands. She was not wearing a wedding ring anymore. Instead, on her right hand, she wore a massive sapphire ring, the Kingsley family crest. "I'm ready," Victoria said, her voice turning to ice. "Is the dress ready?" "It arrived this morning," Arthur said. "It's in your room." Victoria walked upstairs to the master suite. Hanging on the mannequin in the center of the room was the dress. It was breathtaking. A custom-made gown of midnight sky velvet, darker than the night sky. It had long sleeves and a high neckline, modest and regal, but the back was draped with strings of diamonds that looked like stars. It was a dress for a coronation, not a party. Next to it was a mask. It was a masquerade gala this year. The mask was delicate, made of silver lace. It would hide her identity just enough to let her walk right up to him without him knowing, until she wanted him to know. Victoria walked over to the window. The storm from 3 months ago was gone. The sky was clear. "Enjoy your last night of peace, Grant," she whispered to the city lights in the distance, "because tomorrow the Queen returns."
The annual Tech Innovation Gala was the kind of event where the air conditioning smelled like orchids and the champagne cost more than a small car. It was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Temple of Dendur glowing softly under amber lights. A line of limousines stretched down Fifth Avenue, depositing billionaires, tech moguls, and socialites onto the red carpet. Cameras flashed like lightning storms, blinding anyone who stepped out. Grant Harrington stepped out of his silver Bentley feeling like a god. He adjusted his silk bow tie and turned to offer a hand to Isabella. She emerged wearing a dress that left very little to the imagination, a sheer, sparkling gold number with a plunging neckline and a slit that went up to her hip. It was loud. It shouted, "Look at me." "You look magnificent, darling," Grant purred, though his eyes were already scanning the crowd, looking for someone more important. "Tonight is the night. If the rumors are true, the owner of Venture Holdings is here. I need to lock down that supply deal before the Japanese investors get cold feet." Isabella rolled her eyes, linking her arm through his. "Relax, Grant. You are the CEO of Sterling Dynamics. Anyone would be lucky to work with you. Besides, who is this Venture Holdings person? Probably some old, boring man in a gray suit." "We do not know," Grant muttered, guiding her up the stairs. "Nobody has ever seen them. They operate through proxies, but my sources say they are sitting at the Kingsley table." As they entered the grand ballroom, the noise was deafening. Hundreds of people in masks were drinking and laughing. But suddenly the noise dipped. A hush swept across the room, starting from the entrance and rippling outward like a wave. Grant turned to see what everyone was looking at. Walking through the massive bronze doors was a vision. She was alone. She wore a mask of delicate silver lace that covered the upper half of her face, leaving only her dark eyes and red lips visible. But it was her dress that commanded silence. It was midnight blue velvet, high-necked and long-sleeved, fitting her body with a modesty that felt dangerously regal. As she walked, the diamond chains draped across the back of the gown caught the light, making her look like she was wearing the night sky itself. She did not walk like a guest. She walked like she owned the museum. "Who is that?" Grant whispered, mesmerized. Isabella tightened her grip on his arm, her nails digging into his suit. "She is covered up from head to toe, probably hiding something ugly underneath." But Grant was not listening. He watched as the sea of people parted for the mystery woman. He watched as the most powerful men in the room, bankers, senators, oil tycoons, bowed their heads respectfully as she passed. "She's heading to the VIP table," Grant realized, "the Kingsley table." Victoria felt the eyes on her skin. It was a strange sensation. For 2 years she had been invisible. Tonight she was the sun. Behind her mask, she scanned the room. It did not take long to find him. Grant. He looked exactly the same as the night he threw her out, only happier, smug. And Isabella, Victoria almost laughed. Isabella looked cheap. Next to the timeless elegance of the room, Isabella looked like a desperate attempt for attention.
Victoria reached the VIP table. Her father, Arthur, was already seated, wearing a black mask. He stood up as she approached, taking her hand and kissing it. "You look lethal, my dear," Arthur whispered. "Is he watching?" Victoria asked, not turning her head. "He hasn't blinked since you walked in," Arthur chuckled. "Here he comes." Victoria took her seat, her back straight, her hands folded gracefully on the table. She sensed the movement before she saw him. The scent of his cologne, sandalwood, and ambition drifted over her shoulder. "Good evening, Mr. Kingsley," Grant's smooth voice came from behind her. Arthur nodded slowly. "Grant, I did not think you made the list this year." Grant laughed nervously. "Of course, Arthur. Sterling Dynamics is on the verge of a breakthrough. Actually, that's why I came over. I heard a rumor that the owner of Venture Holdings is sitting at your table." Arthur took a sip of his wine. He gestured to the woman sitting next to him, to Victoria. "Grant, may I introduce you to the chairman and majority shareholder of Venture Holdings?" Grant froze. He looked at the woman in the blue velvet dress. He looked at the modest high neck, the covered arms, the regal posture. He had no idea he was looking at the woman who used to knit socks on his couch. Grant quickly adjusted his jacket and bowed slightly, putting on his most charming smile. "Madame, it is an honor. I had no idea Venture Holdings was run by someone so captivating." Victoria turned her head slowly. She looked up at him through the eye holes of her silver mask. Her heart hammered in her chest, but her voice, practiced for weeks with a vocal coach to drop an octave lower, was smooth, husky, and unrecognizable. "Mr. Harrington," she said, "I've heard a lot about you." Grant beamed, puffing out his chest. "All good things, I hope?" "I heard you're a man who values aesthetics," Victoria said, her eyes drifting to Isabella, who was hovering jealously behind him, "and that you have a habit of discarding things that no longer suit your image." Grant's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Business requires tough decisions, madame. Sometimes you have to trim the fat to let the muscle grow. I recently went through a restructuring, in my personal life as well." "Is that so?" Victoria asked, tilting her head. "A divorce?" "Yes," Grant sighed, trying to look like the victim. "My ex-wife, she was a sweet girl, but simple. No ambition, no vision. She held me back. Being with her was like dragging an anchor." Victoria's hand clenched into a fist under the table, but her face remained a mask of polite interest. "An anchor," she repeated. "How terrible for you." "It was," Grant nodded eagerly, thinking he was bonding with this powerful woman. "But looking at you, I can tell you understand. You understand that power attracts power. Actually, I was hoping we could discuss the microchip supply contract. I would love to take you to dinner to discuss it properly." Isabella let out a gasp of indignation behind him, but Grant ignored her. He was shamelessly flirting with the billionaire CEO right in front of his fiancée. Victoria stood up. She was wearing heels that made her taller than she used to be. She looked Grant dead in the eye. "Dinner?" she asked. "Anywhere you like," Grant promised. "Le Bernardin? Per se?" Victoria stepped closer. She was close enough to touch him. She leaned in, whispering near his ear. "I'm afraid I do not dine with men who do not know the value of what they hold, Mr. Harrington. If you could not see the value in your wife, how can I trust you to see the value of my company?" Grant blinked, stunned. "I don't understand." "You will," Victoria said cryptically. "Enjoy the party, Grant. I have a feeling it will be a night you never forget." She turned and walked away, signaling to the band. The music stopped. It was time for the speech. It was time to take off the mask. The music faded completely. A spotlight cut through the darkness of the museum hall, landing on the podium at the front of the room. Arthur Kingsley walked up the steps, his cane clicking rhythmically against the floor. He adjusted the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, Arthur's voice boomed, deep and commanding. "Thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate innovation. For 40 years, the Kingsley Group has led the market. But tonight is not about the past. It is about the future." In the crowd, Grant was practically vibrating with excitement. He whispered to Isabella, "This is it. He's going to announce the new strategic partners. If I can get 5 minutes with the new chairman of Venture Holdings after this speech, the deal is mine." Isabella took a sip of champagne, looking bored. "I still do not like her dress," she muttered, glaring at the woman in blue standing in the shadows behind Arthur. "Who covers themselves up like a nun at a party like this? She's definitely hiding a scar or something." Arthur continued, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed directly on Grant. A small, cold smile touched his lips. "Many of you know me as the Iron Wolf. I built this empire with ruthlessness. But an empire needs more than iron to survive. It needs vision, it needs heart, and most importantly, it needs loyalty." He paused. "I am stepping down as CEO of the Kingsley Group, effective immediately." Gasps rippled through the room. The cameras flashed frantically, and Arthur raised his voice over the noise. "I am handing full control of the Kingsley Group, including our subsidiary Venture Holdings, to my daughter and sole heir." Grant frowned. "Daughter? I thought Kingsley had no children. I thought he was alone." "I was," Arthur said, as if reading Grant's mind. "For a long time, my daughter chose to live a humble life. She wanted to build her own character away from my shadow. She lived among you. Some of you knew her. Some of you underestimated her." Arthur turned to the side and extended his hand toward the shadows. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the new Queen of Wall Street, my daughter, Victoria Vance Kingsley." The woman in the midnight blue dress stepped into the spotlight. The room held its breath. She reached up with gloved hands to the silver ribbon behind her head. With a single fluid motion, she untied the knot. The silver lace mask fell away. She raised her head. The face was unmistakable. It was more polished, yes. The skin was glowing. The makeup was impeccable, and the eyes were fierce. But it was her. It was the woman who used to make Grant oatmeal in the morning. It was the woman who wore the gray cardigan. It was the woman he had kicked out into the rain 3 months ago. Grant dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the stone floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silent room. Shards of glass and expensive vintage champagne splashed onto Isabella's gold dress, but she did not scream. She just stared, her mouth hanging open, looking from the powerful woman on stage to the terrified man beside her. "Victoria," Grant whispered. The words strangled him. "No, that's impossible. She's poor." Victoria stepped up to the microphone. She did not look nervous. She looked like she was born for this podium. She looked out at the crowd of hundreds, but her eyes locked directly onto Grant's. "Thank you, Father." Her voice rang out, clear and steady. "For a long time, I believed that silence was a weakness. I believed that staying in the background made me boring or plain." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But I have learned that true power does not need to shout. True value does not need to show skin. And loyalty," she tilted her head, staring right at Grant, "loyalty is the most expensive currency on earth, and some people simply cannot afford it." The crowd erupted in applause, thinking it was just a metaphor, but Grant knew. He felt the color drain from his extremities. His knees went weak. "Oh my God," Grant muttered, grabbing Isabella's arm for support. "Venture Holdings. Vance. Victoria Vance. She owns the chip supply. She owns the loans." Isabella shoved his hand away. "You told me she was a nobody. You told me she was a librarian." "I did not know," Grant hissed, panic rising in his chest. "She never told me." On stage, Victoria continued. "As my first act as CEO, I will be reviewing all our current partnerships. The Kingsley Group will no longer do business with companies that lack integrity. We are canceling all contracts with partners who prioritize image over substance." Grant felt like the floor was opening up underneath him. That was him. She was talking about Sterling Dynamics. She was publicly announcing his execution, and nobody else knew it yet. Victoria finished her speech and stepped back. The applause was thunderous. As she walked off the stage, descending into the crowd, a pathway cleared for her instantly. She did not walk away from Grant. She walked toward him. Grant could not move. He stood there, surrounded by broken glass and champagne puddles, looking like a wreck, while she approached like a deity. She stopped 2 feet in front of him. The press photographers swarmed around them, sensing the drama. "Mr. Harrington," Victoria said, her voice cool and professional. "Victoria," Grant stammered. He tried to put on his charm, tried to smile, but it looked like a grimace. "I'm stunned. You look incredible. I always knew you had this in you." Isabella let out a scoff of disbelief next to him. "Did you?" Victoria raised an eyebrow. "I seem to remember you calling me an anchor about 10 minutes ago." Grant flushed red. "I was joking. You know my sense of humor. Victoria, look, we need to talk. Privately, about us. About the company." "There's no us," Victoria said calmly. "And as for the company, my assistant will send over the termination papers for the supply contract tomorrow morning." Grant's eyes bulged. "You cannot do that. If you cut the supply, the Japanese deal dies. Sterling Dynamics will go bankrupt." Victoria leaned in closer so only he could hear. "You wanted a power couple, Grant. You wanted a woman who commands the room." She gestured to the hundreds of people watching her. "Well, here I am. But you were right about one thing." "What?" Grant breathed. "You've outgrown me." She quoted his words back to him. "Because I do not date men who are about to be unemployed." She turned her back on him. "Security." 2 massive bodyguards in black suits stepped forward. "Mr. Harrington has made a mess on the floor," Victoria said, pointing to the broken glass. "Please escort him out before he cuts himself. He doesn't seem to fit the aesthetic of tonight's event." As the guards grabbed Grant by the arms, he started shouting, "Victoria, you cannot do that! I'm your husband! I'm still your husband!" "Ex-husband," Victoria called out over her shoulder, not looking back, "and my lawyers will be in touch with the alimony you owe me." As Grant was dragged out of the gala kicking and screaming, with Isabella trailing behind him in humiliation, Victoria took a sip of champagne. She looked at her father. Arthur raised his glass in a toast. The revenge had begun, but Grant's nightmare was just starting.
The sun rose over New York City, casting a golden glow on the skyscrapers, but inside the executive suite of Sterling Dynamics, the mood was apocalyptic. Grant Harrington had not slept. He was still wearing his tuxedo trousers from the night before, his white shirt unbuttoned and stained with sweat. He paced back and forth across his office, holding a phone to his ear, shouting, "What do you mean the Japanese investors pulled out? Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them the supply chain is secure." He paused, listening to the voice on the other end. His face went pale gray. "They saw the news," Grant whispered. "What news?" He grabbed the remote and turned on the large flat-screen TV on his wall. Every business news channel was running the same headline. "Kingsley heir revealed. Victoria Vance takes control. Severs ties with Sterling Dynamics." The ticker at the bottom of the screen showed Sterling Dynamics' stock price. It was not just falling, it was crashing, a red line plummeting straight down. -40%, -55%, -70%. Mr. Harrington? His secretary, a young woman named Sarah, whom he had often criticized for her shoes, stood in the doorway. She did not look scared. She looked smug. The bank is on line 1. They are calling in the loan. They want the $50 million by close of business today, or they seize the assets. Grant dropped the phone. $50 million? I do not have $50 million liquid. It's all tied up in the expansion. Then I guess you are bankrupt. A sharp female voice came from behind him. Grant spun around. Isabella was standing there. She was not wearing her work clothes. She was wearing a trench coat and carrying a large box of her personal belongings. "Isabella!" Grant stammered. "Thank God! Look, it's a mess, but I can fix this. I just need to talk to Victoria. She's emotional. She's acting out. Once I remind her of the good times, she'll call off the attack." Isabella laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound, the same laugh she had used on Victoria 3 months ago. "You really are delusional, are you not?" Isabella shook her head. "She's not acting out, Grant. She's destroying you, and she's doing a great job." "We can fight this," Grant pleaded, reaching for her arm. "We are a team, you and me, the power couple, remember?" Isabella sidestepped him, looking at him like he was something she had stepped in on the sidewalk. "Power couple?" she scoffed. "Grant, look at the stock ticker. You have no power. And without power, you're just a 40-year-old man with a bad temper and a mountain of debt. I do not date debt." She walked to the door, adjusting her sunglasses. "I resigned this morning. I already have an interview at Venture Holdings. I hear they are hiring." "You're going to work for her?" Grant screamed, his veins popping in his neck. "After everything?" "She won, Grant," Isabella said simply. "I bet on the wrong horse. Goodbye." She slammed the door. Grant stood alone in the silence of his crumbling empire. He looked around his office, the expensive mahogany desk, the award plaques, the view of the city. It was all slipping away like sand through his fingers. He needed a miracle. He needed Victoria. He rushed to the bathroom attached to his office. He splashed cold water on his face. He looked at himself in the mirror. He looked haggard, desperate. "Pull yourself together," he hissed at his reflection. "She loved you. She worshipped you for 2 years. You just need to play the victim. Tell her you were confused. Tell her you were scared of commitment. Women love that broken boy nonsense." He grabbed a fresh suit from his emergency closet, shaved quickly, and sprayed on the cologne Victoria used to say she liked. He practiced his sorrowful face in the mirror. Then he marched out of the building and hailed a taxi. His driver had already quit. To the Kingsley Tower. The Kingsley Tower was a fortress of black glass and steel in Midtown. Grant had walked past it 1,000 times, never knowing his wife's name was on the deed. He stormed into the lobby, marching up to the front desk. "I need to see Victoria Kingsley," Grant demanded. "I am her husband." The receptionist, a man with a sharp jawline, did not even look up from his computer. "Ex-husband, according to the memo we received this morning, and Miss Kingsley is in a meeting." "I don't care." Grant slammed his hand on the desk. "Tell her it's an emergency. Tell her it's about the baby." The receptionist looked up, raising an eyebrow. "The baby?" "Yes, we were trying for a baby," Grant lied, desperation making him sloppy. "I need to discuss our future family." It was a gamble, a disgusting lie, but it worked. The receptionist hesitated, then picked up the phone. He whispered something, listened, and then hung up. "Miss Kingsley will see you. Top floor. You have 5 minutes." Grant smirked. "I knew it," he thought, as he stepped into the elevator. "She still has a soft spot. She still wants me." The elevator ride felt like an eternity. When the doors opened, he was not in a hallway. He was directly in a massive office that spanned the entire floor. Victoria sat behind a desk made of white marble. The wall behind her was entirely glass, framing the Empire State Building. She was not wearing the gala gown anymore. She was wearing a sharp, modest white power suit with a silk hijab draped elegantly over her hair, a new style she was experimenting with, blending her fashion with even more dignity. She looked untouchable. Arthur was sitting on a sofa in the corner, reading a newspaper, but he didn't look up. "Grant," Victoria said, without standing up. She did not offer him a seat.
You said there was an emergency about a baby." Grant walked forward, putting on his best sad puppy face. He stopped in front of the desk, dropping to his knees, a theatrical gesture he knew she used to find romantic in movies. "Victoria," he choked out, forcing tears into his eyes. "I lied to get in here. There's no baby yet, but there could be." Victoria stared at him blankly. "Get up, Grant. You're ruining your suit pants, and I know they're not yours anymore. The bank probably owns them now." "I was a fool," Grant shouted, crawling closer to the desk. "I was scared, Vicky. The success, the pressure, it got to my head. I pushed you away because I thought I didn't deserve you. I pushed you away to protect you." Victoria picked up a pen and twirled it between her fingers. "You pushed me away because I wore a gray cardigan and didn't fit your aesthetic. You told me I was dust." "I didn't mean it," Grant pleaded. "I was drunk. I was stressed. Isabella, she manipulated me. She bewitched me. I never loved her. It was always you, Victoria. You're the only woman I've ever loved. Please call off the bank. Call off the lawyers. Let me come home." He reached out, trying to grab her hand that was resting on the desk. Victoria did not pull her hand away. She let him touch it. Her skin was cool. "You want to come home?" Victoria asked, softly. Grant's heart leapt. "Yes, yes, my love. Let us start over. I'll be the husband you deserve. I'll quit the CEO job. We can travel. We can just be us." Victoria smiled. It was a gentle smile. For a second, Grant thought he had won. He thought he had manipulated her again. "Arthur," Victoria said, not looking away from Grant, "pass me the remote." Arthur stood up and handed her a sleek silver remote. Victoria pressed a button. A panel in the wall slid open, revealing a large screen. "I thought you might say that, Grant," Victoria said. "I thought you might blame Isabella. I thought you might say you never loved Isabella." On the screen, a video started. It was grainy, black and white security footage. It was from the elevator in Grant's old penthouse. Grant froze. The video showed Grant and Isabella in the elevator 3 months ago, the night he kicked Victoria out. In the video, Grant was laughing. He was kissing Isabella passionately. The audio crackled to life. Grant's voice on the video. "God, I'm so glad the witch is gone. Did you see her face? I loved you, Grant. Pathetic. I should have dumped her a year ago. She smelled like old books and poverty." Isabella's voice. "Are you sure she won't try to claim alimony?" Grant's voice. "Let her try. I'll bury her in legal fees until she starves. She's nothing without me. She's trash." The video ended. The screen went black. In the office, the silence was heavy enough to crush a man. Grant slowly took his hand off Victoria's. He looked up at her. Her face had not changed. "Trash," Victoria repeated his word. "Trash, and nothing without you." She stood up, towering over him as he knelt on the floor. "I didn't play that video to hurt you, Grant. I played it to remind you that I am not the naive girl who knit you socks anymore. I'm the woman who heard every word." "Victoria," Grant whispered, his voice shaking. "Get out," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it had the weight of a judge's gavel. "But the bank," Grant wept. "They're going to take everything. I'll be homeless." Victoria walked back to the window, looking out at the city. "Then I suggest you buy a warm coat. I hear it's going to rain tonight." Arthur stood up and opened the door. 2 security guards were waiting. "Take the trash out," Arthur ordered.
Grant Harrington stood on the sidewalk outside the luxury apartment building where he had lived for 5 years. It was raining again, a cold, gray drizzle that soaked through his suit. But this was not his expensive Italian suit. That had been seized by the creditors. This was an off-the-rack suit he had bought at a discount store, and it fit him poorly. Next to him on the wet pavement were 3 cardboard boxes. That was it. That was all that remained of the king of sterling dynamics. The doorman, a man named Henry, whom Grant had never tipped once in 5 years, stood by the glass doors with his arms crossed. "You cannot loiter here, Mr. Harrington," Henry said, his voice void of sympathy. "The new tenants are moving in this afternoon." "I am waiting for my Uber,"
Grant snapped, though his voice lacked its usual bite. He looked at his phone. Ride canceled. Insufficient funds. Grant cursed and shoved the phone into his pocket. He picked up the heavy boxes and started walking. The fall had been fast and brutal. First, the bank took the company. They stripped it for parts, selling the assets to pay off the massive debt. Then they came for his personal assets. The penthouse, foreclosed. The Bentley, repossessed. The summer house in the Hamptons, gone. Even his friends, the business elites he used to drink whiskey with, had blocked his number. Nobody wanted to be associated with the man who had insulted the Kingsley family. He was toxic. Grant walked 4 blocks to the nearest pawn shop. He placed his Rolex on the counter. It was the last thing of value he owned. $5,000, the pawnbroker grunted, not even looking up. $5,000? Grant was outraged. This is a Daytona. It's worth $40,000. It was worth $40,000, the man said, looking at Grant with dull eyes. But I see your name engraved on the back, Grant Harrington. Nobody wants a watch with a loser's name on it. $5,000. Take it or leave it. Grant took the cash. His hands shook. He spent the next week living in a cramped, dingy motel in Queens. The wallpaper was peeling, and the air smelled of stale cigarettes. It was a far cry from the marble floors and fresh orchids of his old life. Every morning, he put on his cheap suit and went to job interviews. He applied for VP roles, then director roles, then manager roles. I am sorry, Mr. Harrington, the HR director of a mid-sized logistics firm told him, sliding his resume back across the desk. Your qualifications are impressive, but we have a strict policy about reputation. Reputation? Grant asked, leaning forward. I built a $100 million company. And you lost it in 24 hours because you could not keep your marriage together, the HR director said bluntly. And frankly, we do a lot of business with venture holdings. If we hire you, the Kingsleys might pull their contracts with us. You are a liability. I'm blacklisted, Grant realized, slumping back in his chair. Effectively, yes, the man nodded. Have you considered a different industry, maybe retail? Grant walked out of the office, dazed. He walked past a newsstand. There, staring back at him from the cover of Forbes magazine, was Victoria. She looked majestic. She was wearing a cream-colored turtleneck and a long camel coat, standing in front of the Kingsley Tower. She wasn't showing any skin. She wasn't trying to look sexy. She looked powerful. The headline read, "The Rise of Victoria. How Modesty and Morality Returned to Wall Street." Grant bought the magazine with his last few dollars. He sat on a park bench and read the interview. My ex-husband taught me a valuable lesson, Victoria was quoted in the article. He taught me that some people chase the shine because they lack the substance. I am grateful to him. He set me free to find someone who values the soul, not the shell. Grant stared at the page. She was grateful? She wasn't angry anymore. She had moved on. She was soaring, and he was rotting. A shadow fell over him. Grant. He looked up. Standing there was Isabella, but she didn't look like the glamorous VP anymore. Her hair was messy, her roots were showing, and she was wearing jeans and a hoodie. Isabella, Grant stood up. Did you get the job at Venture Holdings? Isabella laughed, a bitter, broken sound. Get the job? They laughed me out of the building. Victoria didn't even meet me. Her assistant just handed me a printout of my emails where I called her dust and told me to leave. She looked at Grant with pure hatred. This is your fault. You dragged me down with you. I'm ruined in this city. I'm moving back to Ohio to live with my parents. Isabella, wait. Grant reached out. We can fix this. I have $5,000. We can go somewhere else. We can start over. Isabella looked at his hand, then at his cheap suit, then at the motel key in his pocket. You really don't get it, she spat. I didn't love you, Grant. I loved the Bentley. I loved the penthouse. Without those, you're just average. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Grant sat back down on the bench. He looked at the magazine cover again. He traced Victoria's face with his thumb. He remembered the nights she used to read next to him in bed. He remembered how she used to rub his shoulders when he was stressed. He remembered how safe he felt with her. He had traded a diamond for a piece of glass because the glass sparkled more. It began to rain. Grant didn't move. He sat there, getting soaked, clutching the magazine like a lifeline. He finally understood what Victoria meant that night in the penthouse. It's going to rain tonight. He was cold, he was alone, and for the first time in his life, he realized he was poor, not because he had no money, but because he had no one. The seasons changed, and with them the landscape of the city. Victoria didn't just run the Kingsley empire, she revolutionized it. Under her leadership, the stock price tripled. But it wasn't just about the money. She established the Vance Foundation, funded entirely by her personal wealth. It provided grants to small businesses run by women who had been underestimated, ignored, or cast aside. She turned her father's ruthless legacy into one of empowerment. Victoria sat in her office looking over the blueprints for a new community center she was building in Queens, near the very motel where Grant had spent his last miserable nights in the city. "Victoria," Arthur stood at the doorway. He looked healthier than he had in years. Retirement suited him mostly because he got to watch his daughter rule. "You're working late again." "I'm almost done, Daddy," she smiled, taking off her reading glasses. "I just want these designs to be perfect." "You need a break," Arthur insisted, walking in. "You've spent a year cleaning up messes and building bridges. You haven't taken a single weekend for yourself." He sat down opposite her. "There's someone I want you to meet." Victoria groaned playfully. "Dad, please, no more setups."
I am perfectly happy being married to my job. This is not a setup, Arthur lied smoothly. This is business. We need a new architect for the community center project. The current designs are lacking soul. He placed a portfolio on her desk. The name on the cover read Daniel Reed Architects. Victoria opened it. She expected cold glass and steel, the kind of modernism Grant used to love. Instead, she saw warmth. She saw designs that used natural light, reclaimed wood, and spaces built for connection, not just impressive aesthetics. "He's talented," Victoria admitted, running her finger over a sketch of a sunlit courtyard. "He's outside," Arthur smirked. Victoria glared at her father, but she could not help but be intrigued. "Send him in." Daniel Reed walked in. He was not what she expected. He did not wear a $5,000 Italian suit. He wore dark denim jeans, a simple charcoal button-down shirt with rolled-up sleeves, and boots that looked like they had actually walked on construction sites. He had kind, crinkling eyes and a short beard that made him look rugged but approachable. He held a rolled-up blueprint under his arm. He stopped when he saw her, and for a moment he just stared. "Mr. Reed?" Victoria asked, amused by his reaction. "Apologies, Miss Kingsley," Daniel recovered, smiling a genuine, easy smile. "Your father told me you were the tough one, but he did not tell me you were the beautiful one." It was a simple compliment, but it did not feel slick like Grant's charm. It felt real. "Flattery will not get you the contract, Mr. Reed," Victoria said, indicating the chair. "Have a seat. Show me your soul." They talked for 3 hours. They did not just talk about architecture. They talked about why spaces matter, about how a building can make a person feel safe or intimidated. Daniel listened to her. He did not interrupt. He did not look at his phone. He looked at her with an intensity that made her realize how long it had been since a man had truly seen her. "My wife passed away 3 years ago," Daniel shared quietly as they looked out at the city lights. "She was a teacher. She always wanted a space where her students could feel inspired. That is why I designed the way I do. For her."
Victoria felt a pang in her chest. A man who loved his wife even after she was gone. A man driven by memory and honor, not greed. "You are hired, Daniel," Victoria said softly. As he was leaving, he hesitated at the door. "Victoria," he said, using her first name for the first time. "I know you're busy running the world, but if you ever want to get coffee that doesn't taste like an office machine, I know a place. It's small, it's not fancy, but it's real." Victoria thought about Grant's demands for Lubinardan and Per se. She thought about the pressure to always be seen at the right places. "Real sounds perfect," Victoria smiled. "Tomorrow at 10. Daniel beamed. "Tomorrow at 10. As he left, Arthur popped his head back in, grinning like a Cheshire cat. "I hate you," Victoria laughed. "No, you don't," Arthur winked. "You like him, and more importantly, he likes you, not the checkbook." For the first time since the divorce, Victoria felt a spark of hope that had nothing to do with revenge or business. The ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Vance Community Center was a massive event. The press was there, the mayor was there, and hundreds of families from the neighborhood were waiting to get in. Victoria stood on the makeshift stage. She wore a simple, elegant, cream-colored dress, modest, of course, and stood next to Daniel. They were not holding hands, but the way they stood close, the way they shared secret smiles, spoke volumes. Daniel had become her anchor, not the kind that dragged her down, but the kind that kept her steady in a storm. They took long walks in the park. They ate at small diners. He never asked about her money. He only asked about her day. "This building," Victoria said into the microphone, "is dedicated to the idea that everyone deserves a chance, that true value is not in what you wear, but in what you build." The crowd cheered. As Victoria stepped down from the stage, she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned around. It was a man in a uniform, a janitor's uniform. It took her a moment to recognize him. He had lost weight. His hair was graying at the temples and receding. His eyes, once arrogant, were dull and tired. "Grant," Victoria whispered. Grant Harrington looked down at his feet. He held a mop in one hand. "Hello, Victoria." His voice was raspy. "I work here. I'm the night shift custodian." Victoria stared at him. The CEO of Sterling Dynamics, the man who drank $1,000 champagne, was now mopping the floors of a building she had built. "I didn't know," Victoria said truthfully. "I don't handle the hiring for the maintenance staff." "I know," Grant said, looking up at her quickly, then away again. "I just saw you on stage. You look happy." Daniel stepped up beside Victoria, placing a protective hand on the small of her back. He looked at Grant, then at Victoria, realizing who this man was. "Everything okay, Vic?" Daniel asked quietly. "Yes," Victoria said, not looking away from her ex-husband. "Grant, this is Daniel Reed, the architect who designed this building." Grant looked at Daniel. He saw the sturdy boots, the simple clothes, the kind eyes. He saw a man who was everything he used to mock. "He's a good man," Grant murmured. "You can tell." Grant looked back at Victoria. There was no anger in his eyes anymore, no scheming, just defeat and a profound, aching regret. "I read the article," Grant said, "in Forbes, about the lesson you taught me." Victoria nodded slowly. "I'm glad," Grant choked out. "I'm glad you didn't let me break you. I'm glad you found someone who sees the better in you, because I'm living in the worse every single day." He gripped the mop handle tighter. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Not because I want anything. I know it's too late. I just needed you to hear it. I was the fool. I was the one buying glass and calling it diamonds." He started to turn away, ready to go back to his closet, to wait for the crowd to leave so he could clean up their mess. "Grant?" Victoria called out. He stopped. Victoria reached into her purse. She pulled out a card, not a credit card, a business card for the Vance Foundation. "We have a program," Victoria said, holding the card out to him, "for people who need a second chance. It offers retraining, financial counseling, and job placement in fields that have a future." Grant stared at the card. "Why?" he asked hoarsely. "After everything I did to you?" Victoria looked at Daniel, who squeezed her hand supportively. "Because I'm a Kingsley," she said proudly, "and we build things. We don't just tear them down. You broke me, Grant, but I rebuilt myself stronger. Maybe you can too." Grant took the card with trembling fingers. He looked at it like it was a life-server in the middle of the ocean. "Thank you," he whispered. Tears finally spilled out of his eyes, cutting clean tracks through the dust on his face. "Thank you, Victoria." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the service hallway, clutching the small white card. Victoria watched him go. She felt a heavy weight finally lift from her heart. The anger was gone. The need for revenge was gone. All that was left was peace. Daniel kissed her temple. "You are amazing, you know that?" Victoria smiled up at him. "I know."
The evening air was cool, but not cold. Victoria sat wrapped in a thick hand-knitted blanket, one she had made herself, on the balcony of the brownstone she shared with Daniel in Brooklyn. It was not a penthouse. It did not have marble floors, but it was filled with light, books, and laughter. Inside, she could hear Daniel singing off-key as he cooked dinner. The smell of garlic and roasted chicken wafted out. Arthur sat in an armchair opposite her, sipping a cup of tea. He was fully retired now, spending his days gardening and spoiling his future grandchildren. "He is doing well, you know," Arthur said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. Victoria did not need to ask who. "Grant?" Arthur nodded. "He finished the program. He is managing a small logistics warehouse in Jersey now. It is not glamorous. He wears a high-vis vest and drives a forklift sometimes, but he is sober, he pays his taxes, he is content." Victoria looked out over the city skyline. The Kingsley Tower stood tall in the distance, a monument to her power, but her home was here. "I am glad," she said genuinely. She touched the simple gold band on her finger, her wedding ring from Daniel. It had no diamonds. It was just gold, strong and unbroken. "You know, Daddy," Victoria said reflectively, "for a long time I thought the story was about me getting revenge on Grant. I thought it was about showing him the billionaire he missed out on." Arthur smiled, putting down his cup. "And what is the story, my flower?" Victoria looked back inside, where Daniel was laughing as he dropped a pot lid. It was never about him, Victoria realized. It was about me remembering who I was. The money did not make me a queen. The title did not make me a queen. I was a queen when I was wearing that gray cardigan, buying yarn, and loving a man who did not deserve it. Because I had a heart that could love that deeply. She snuggled deeper into her blanket. "He broke my heart," she whispered. "But you and Daniel, you helped me turn the pieces into a crown." Daniel walked out onto the balcony carrying 2 plates of food. He kissed Victoria on the forehead and sat down beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Dinner is served, Your Highness," he joked. Victoria laughed, leaning her head against his shoulder. She was rich, not because of the billions in her bank account, but because she was finally truly loved for exactly who she was.